everyone. I'm Ina from Kaltura, and thank you for joining us today for this virtual fireside chat on how can you turn your data into actionable insights and improve your cloud TV service KPIs. Prior to this session, we invited you to send us the questions that you would like our experts to address. And I must admit, we have received a lot of interesting questions and decided to dedicate our time together to actually cover the topics that you found the most interesting. In terms of the agenda, we will leave about 10 minutes at the end of the session for some additional live questions that you might have following this discussion. We encourage you to use the chat during the session and send those questions to us, and we will address those at the end. And now I would like to introduce our experts that joined us today as well. We have Geronimo Macanas, CEO of Jump Data Driven Video. And thank you, Geronimo. Hi. And we also have Gideon Gilboa, Executive Vice President of Product Solutions of Kaltura's Media and Telecom Division. So guys, to you.
Thanks a lot. Welcome, everybody. And thanks, for the introductions. This is actually a really funny panel because it's the first time I'm going to act as an interviewer. So great. I hope you all guys have fun and learn a bit about us. So let's get started. So Giri, what do you have for lunch today?
It's a great question. It is a great question, Geronimo. Hi, everyone. First of all, well, I must say I had the data. I'm having data for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's all I eat. But on a serious note, I had the hummus. I don't know if you know hummus. It's like chickpea.
Yeah, of course.
Very healthy, very good for you. I recommend it every day. Thanks.
Okay, out of jokes, let's get started with the questions. So Giri, we received a lot of questions that are pretty similar, and I would like to summarize some of them in one like this one. That it says, what do you think, or what do you find as the main driver for the convergence of data and TV actually in our industry?
Yeah, it's a big one. I think maybe starting with a little bit of history. In my mind, being in the TV space for the last almost 20 years, I only look young. TV and data were very strange concepts. Actually, everything to do with data on TV until not so long ago was like black voodoo or something. In the early 2000s, TV measurement in big markets like the US was partially still done by diaries. People were actually going every night at the end of the day, writing in a diary what they watched, and that was the basis for TV rating and measurement for a long time. And I remember that until not so long ago, it's easy to forget, maybe 10 years ago, the discussion was actually how to get data. We were working at the time, I was working in a different company, we were working on how to get data from PSTN modem connected set-top boxes and trying to compress the data. So if a decade ago, the question was how to get data, the question now is, okay, we have the data, what are we going to do with it? And I think that the driver for the convergence now that the data is available, the driver for the convergence of TV and data is going to be all about the competition. In the US alone, if I go back to the same market, there are now over 200 OTT services that are streaming video, that all the data is available from all the devices. And in order to differentiate, people understand that it's not enough to have good content and the right pricing strategy. They also need to have the right data and to understand who they want to target, who they want to acquire, which subscribers they need to invest in. So I think competition will be the big driver for that convergence.
That's totally right. Actually, just to add on top of that, and that links with the second question that I had for you today, we are seeing tons of video service providers that have been investing a lot of money and efforts in creating like a lot of infrastructure, right, for gathering data and for storing data. That's true that now they are, well, like, okay, what should I do now? I have a lot of data. Most of the data is updated. So I should like restart again. So I think let's focus on the point that you made about what to do with data. I think that probably links with video service providers need to transform and the video service experiences, the video services into more data-driven entertainment experiences to make the most out of that vast amount of data. So what do you think are the main elements for that, for such a transformation that at the end is a strategic transformation? It's not just operationally or you know, product or technology driven. It's more than that. So, and what do you think are the main benefits and challenges at the same time of such a strategic transformation?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It sounds trivial, but I would say that the first element is, boy, you got to have a strategy. I mean, you'd be surprised. Many people, not to disrespect anyone, but they approach Kaltura, that's, you know, a leading cloud TV platform. We get a lot of opportunities from different parts of the world, and they approach us as a technology provider before they have that strategy. And they start talking about APIs and latency and video codecs and CMSs and all sorts of boring technology, things like that, before they realize what the strategy is. So what do I mean by strategy is like, what content are you trying to offer? What is your business and what are your marketing goals? So, you know, as an example, let's say one of your key marketing goals is engagement. Okay, what are the KPIs you're going to use to measure engagement on your service, time spent and duration and so on and so forth? And then, only then figure out, okay, how do I get the two things? One, a holistic data infrastructure and a data management platform that actually allows you to get to those KPIs, because guess what? Sometimes those KPIs are combined from multiple sources and they're coming from different places and they require external data. And then you also need, once you have that the data management platform, you need the holistic platform that actually lets you act on this data. Because, you know, it's great to have the insights. You also want to make an impact on the users. So I think these are the three things to summarize. I know it was a long answer, but have the right strategy, the right KPIs, build the infrastructure around that and not before that, and have the platform to act on that data infrastructure. Does this make sense?
Perfect sense.
Good, good. I think, of course, you know, this is easy to say, but then starts the real challenges. And I guess you, Geronimo, have been in the trenches, so to speak, of actually getting in the bleeding edge of getting data into those services. So what are the, let me ask you, what are the challenges that you're witnessing around collection of the data? Like,
yeah, that's a very hot topic. You're right. So essentially, once you have a strategy in place, a second common mistake that we are seeing in several customers and opportunities out there in the market is well, now we know the strategy and we want like insights, right? Or as you mentioned, actionable insights. We want to know what is happening. We want to know what is going to happen. And then we want to activate data and make an impact on our user behavior to improve our ROI, basically, right? In simple words. But the reality is that they first need to go through a journey. A data-driven strategy implementation is a journey. And you need to start from the basics, like if you are building a house, right? So first of all, one of our main advices when people ask us, how should I start? What is the challenges with retrieving data? All of that at the end comes a bit later. But first of all, It's all about fixing your data fragmentation. There is a huge fragmentation in data sources because we all know what the video ecosystem means. And unfortunately, there is no just one single piece or just one single vendor or just one single data source that you need to work with to manage your business. So first of all, it's creating this unique source of truth that is gonna be the pillar for later on your data strategy. And once you trust your data sources, once you trust this unique source of truth, is when comes the rest. That's true that this is a heavy task. Traditionally, especially video service operators have been investing a lot in creating these big data projects, 2 years duration, millions of dollars invested, right? And at the end, is they end up with kind of frustration many times because it's a long process and costly one. So I think now cloud and cloud data technologies really can help to ease that process and to really go through this first step. This is the most important one. Second challenge is build unified insights. Not necessarily that you have all your data in one repository. It means that you really have unified insights because you need to correlate data, create meaningful relationships between data to really look at your video business in a holistic way. So my second advice to face the challenge is to really, once you have the data infrastructure, think in how to really have this holistic view. Otherwise, it's gonna be very difficult to move along the data journey in the more advanced phases like advanced analytics or predictions or AI or all these things. And probably the last one is really related with what you mentioned. It's about make data easily available within your organization. That's a very common mistake. There's a lot of reports, there's a lot of information available, but people cannot really use this data in very creative ways. It's not just using it as it should be used. You can use data for reinventing your business models. You can use data for redesign your user experience. You can use data for tons of things. And it's very important to, in some way, do a democratization process of the internal data of a video service organization. That it's the most important thing. And last, that it's more on the advanced part of the journey, is take into consideration that when you move to the predictive analytics world, is not the same data science that big data science. Scale is important in this streaming world, as we all know. And when you try to build up machine learning models for whatever, predictions of churners or trial converters, whatever, you need to think that you are gonna need to build models with millions of subscribers involved in the process. So you need to make sure that you have the capabilities for managing that scale, and in data science, that is not a trivial thing. And of course, again, just to finalize, this is a journey. So you need to start step by step. And I mean, the most important thing is to start now, today, right? To start running that process.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that the other thing is that you know, companies like yourself have actually, I think, made the kickstart of this project for other companies simpler. Like, you don't have, from what I've seen, right, you don't have to run a 2-year, millions of dollars project in order to get results. You could get things much faster with the capabilities today that companies like you and others have.
Totally. That was the essence of our company, actually. Try to build up the best practices in data from the best companies that they build it in-house, let's say Netflix, Amazon, and Google, basically. And then put all this in a SaaS platform that really people can use in a very easy way, that they don't require huge investment and that don't really require years of projects.
And there's one thing that I always, you know, always comes up, and I think is a fair question to ask. Was we were asked here again. I'm interested in your view. You talked about the journey. People always talk about quantities. Like, how do I deal with the amount of data? How much data should I save? Do I need to delete the data? Like, do I need to keep years and years of data? What should I take to deal with these volumes? What actions should I take to deal with these volumes of data?
That's a good question. To be honest, I think that it's been changing along maybe the last 1 or 2 years. That's true that that question comes to the table very often some years ago, because data volumes equal cost, essentially, right? It doesn't matter if it's on premises or cloud. Of course, on premises, much more money, but cloud, at the end, there is a cost component. The reality is that cost has been going down and down and down. And there is a threshold when, depending on your volumes, of course, but there is a threshold that the process of managing data that you don't want to ingest versus ingesting all the data that your video service is generating is starting to pay off. So I would say 70% of our customers, and some of them are really big, decided to just make ingestion of all data sources. I mean, meaning that all is not necessarily that you are ingesting every single piece of data that your service is generating, but everything around, audience registration data, content catalog, playback activity, commerce, events, subscriptions, transactions, ad monetizations, and UX activity. That becomes like the mandatory core ingestion data portfolio. To be honest, the most important is not what data you ingest, is what data are you gonna focus in really creating these meaningful relationships, getting the insights and all of that. And that is fully related with what's the maturity of your video business. So, and that changed completely the focus. So if you are a new brand OTT service or video service and you're in launch phase, your focus is growth. And so that means that you're gonna focus on conversion, right? So you need to focus and make the most out of your insights in how can I optimize the acquisition channels, investments, right? So which channels should I invest more? Which ones pay off or have a lead to a faster campaign payback? Or all these questions are the most important. How can I focus on trials that are most likely to convert into paying users? So you need to focus a lot your efforts, both not just in marketing, of course, but also in which data are you gonna focus. When you move along the journey, when you are in a more growth phase, then your focus is retention, right? So then you need to keep the subscribers that you have acquired, and for that, it becomes very relevant how you treat things like churn. If you're gonna able to focus, I have a very interesting use case that we recently finished 1 month ago, and we are still seeing the results. That is a big broadcaster with a direct-to-consumer service that they were very worried about the end of Big Brother, right? They thought that when Big Brother will end, they will have a massive churn. So instead of focusing on your entire audience with hundreds of different casuistics, these guys with our help focus on understanding what are the reasoning for Big Brother lovers to churn, right? Comparing, of course, last year's results with this year's data. And then we end up with a very interesting thing. And now what they are doing is driving people that were Big Brother lovers to other kind of content that could be relevant for them as well. And to be honest, they saved quite a lot of them compared with last year's results that they were doing nothing. So that's the kind of things that you should focus on the growth phase, retention. And then of course in the maturity, it's all about engagement, right? So on that phase, you need to focus on what is the quality of your content catalog, what are the different audience segments that you have, how are you gonna treat differently of these audience segments and all of that. So but in summary, I think depending on the maturity of your video business, you should focus in one pieces of data more than others. It's not, they are not all the same.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, so Gide, let me also review some of the questions that we received. Some of them are about which measures service operators can take to make their data operational and also to improve the usability of their data. So looks like there's a lot of people worry about how they can, you know, fill this gap of okay, I have data. What's the next step? How can I now jump and using it today, right? So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think in general it relates a lot to what you just said, because I think it is a fear, right? That you got this great data lake and you're ready to jump in and swim in the data lake, but you know, you're not sure how to dip your toe in the water. So I think to me, one comment is, and you know, it's easy to say that as a vendor, but I truly believe in that. Get help outside help, because sometimes, and I've seen that, especially on the data side, there's this fashion of oh, you know, this is, let's just build our own infrastructure and see what happens. And it's not easy, it's not always trivial to do that. You can shortcut. I know that when we started as a vendor, our internal journey on using the vast amounts of global data that we have from over 50 million monthly active users across the globe, multiple business cases, AVOD, SVOD, pay TV, we needed help. Like we couldn't get the value of that data initially. So I think that's point number one. I think it goes back now a little bit to what we said earlier, what I talked about with regards to goals. So understand what your business and marketing goals are. To your point about which phase that you're in the maturity of the service, but I want to add another layer to help understand the concept of usability of data, and it's the personas. The different personas within the organization that require different types of data and even different types of infrastructure for that data. So a couple of examples, right? Your operations people might be interested in quality of experience data, because all they care about, if you are an AVOD service, that the playability percent is high. And that quality of experience data actually requires some near real-time infrastructure for ingesting real-time QoE data from the player and player events and so on and so forth. So, you know, if you understand that you have these people in your organization and that's part of what you need, you will also need that infrastructure and understand how those people work. Like the person that is in charge of that in the operations team wakes up every morning, and what are the 5 metrics that he looks at and how to make that data accessible. On the other hand, the marketing side, right, is more interested in consumption, and maybe the technology there also has more machine learning or other types of AI to predict churn or whatever, like the examples that you mentioned. So I think that's one thing. So look at the personas and what they need. The final thing is think about the receiving end, like ultimately who is going to act on the data and how. So the QoE point example, the operations person, what are they going to do if they find something wrong in the data? They find that the playability is gone down. Are they going to make some changes in the player? Are they going to check the CDN? What are they able to do? What they can do? So make sure that there's a path, there's an end-to-end path for that. And the same goes for marketing. The marketeer wakes up every morning, and what do they need to do? Can they actually create offers based on the attributes that the data is showing them? Can they target people? Can they create promotions, and do they have the right tools? So I think I would say these are the main main things for making the data really usable in real life.
Yeah, I think that's interesting point, and also I think that is related to the accessibility of data, right? Accessibility means different things for different personas, right? While maybe the tech guys are gonna be very interested that you open up, you know, your data lake for them to query and you know and look and navigate through the data lake as you mentioned, and then discover very specific things. The marketing guys probably are just expecting a daily report on the mailbox that's going to tell them how it looks like your business today, right? So I think that aspect of accessibility, I think, is crucial. Otherwise, data strategies never pay off.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed.
Do you have any take of importance of the timing related with data? I mean, we have seen many organizations that, you know, they create these extensive reports of 300 KPIs on Excel file, and then it takes like a couple of weeks to, you know, to be generated. And then when really you get in is, well, okay, now I can do nothing, right? I just lost the window opportunity. What do you think is the market moving on that sense? And is there any trend that you are seeing when people or your customers are requiring data? Is this concept of agile data?
This concept of what? Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Agile data.
Agile data. Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. I think again, it goes back to what I said earlier. I think there is we are seeing it as the platform in places where it works well. We're actually seeing feedback that comes in to us to based on real-time insights to help our customers optimize things. I'll give you an example. One customer, they looked at, actually that was more quality of experience data, and they looked at the data and they saw that it actually, in certain regions, this is a developing market, it takes a lot of time for the first video to load because establishing the DNS connection in that market is difficult. And with analytics, deep player analytics, we're able to understand exactly how the networking layer of the player is working and what's going on there. And we then provided like a fix or an update that actually started to establish that connection as soon as you open the app and before you click on the first video. So within a matter of a couple of weeks, we were able to actually give them a release that solved a problem that was very acute for the business based on data. And that's a good example. And of course, there are bad examples for that. So you know, I think that's one thing. The other thing is really how you close that loop, right? How do you, and this is something that, you know, you and I have discussed a lot, like how do we continuously make sure that we get some data, we make some change, we get the information about what that change was, we iterate. It's easier said than done, I think, in many cases. It's easier said than done, but I think that's an important thing. Like if you don't have the ability to do that, to add a new business model, to add a new promotion, to add a new discount, to target a specific segment, the data insights are not going to help you. And if you don't have the right data insights and the right source of truth, to go back to your earlier comments, then, you know, whatever tools you have also won't help you. So I think that's that area. I don't know, where do you see, like when we're talking about how people need to improve their services, where do you see that the focus, or where should it be? I mean, we talked a little bit about QoE, we talked about marketing. Yeah. Where do you think should be the focus?
I really believe, of course, that any video service provider's value chain step can be optimized with the right data, with the right use of data, right? from the examples that you mentioned of QoE, but also, for example, there is a lot of room for improvement in coding optimization. We have seen that during this pandemic thing. And of course, targeted marketing as one of the examples that you mentioned, right? So select specifically a group of people that you know a lot about them, and then be very concrete with the actions that you do and track back performance is something really that it's a lot in there for improvement. But if I will need to focus on core, again, I think today it's mandatory to optimize your core business processes in video business, right? That is acquisition, retention, engagement. So we have seen a trend change in the last, I guess, 1 year, last 12 months. At the beginning, I remember that when new video services kick off, they were just worry about quality of experience, or, the user experience in their apps. And more, when we find new customers, they come with the, lessons learned that they really need to manage since day zero their business using data, that they cannot put that like in a second phase, right? So, for example, linking with one of the previous examples, more and more, we are finding new customers that are asking us, hey, Jam, how can you help us to really assess which acquisition channel should I invest? Because I don't want to invest, my whole budget, my whole yearly budget in one specific channels. I want to be able to really, week by week or month by month as latest, shift and then put the money in the right acquisition channels. And this is something that you can really look at with data. You can look at data and how long it takes to pay back that campaign, which channels drives to a higher customer lifetime value compared with others. These kind of things are really there. So you can really look at that. So this is one example. I think it's really relevant. And then, of course, depending again of the maturity, how you help these video services to convert better and retain better and engage better, right? And this is all about getting the insights, being able to predict once you have a certain number of months. People think that you cannot do predictions until you have 3 years data. That's not true. Actually, 3 years data don't really care for predictions, because dynamics in user behavior change a lot. I think from 3 to 6 months you can really start to use predictive analytics in a right way. But then getting the insights, make predictions about what is going to happen, and then iterate with the marketing campaigns and assess the performance of that campaigns, right? So that's what I should focus if I will launch a service, and I will need to put focus on data, is create this circle of data analysis and data action that really drives the decisions that we are going to do, right? And just to give an example on this as well, and I think that's a very important touch that I think we should discuss, is that people think that AI is all about, automatic algorithms that are, making decisions for us. And I don't think that is probably the smart combination. We have seen today, probably most of the audience have seen it, the announcement of HBO Max, that essentially they are differentiating from Netflix in that they are going to combine AI and human editorialization all together for creating like a more human focus video service, right? But of course, with a lot of AI behind that, but putting a human touch and combining both, I think is probably the secret sauce to really make the most out of data. Is you need to have the data, you need to have this augmented intelligence, but at the end, the experts have a lot to say. I think that's a common fear when we talk to customers about AI. It's like AI is going to replace everything. I do not agree, and I'm an AI company, right? So that's my key on the focus.
Yeah. Yes. I think I agree. I agree on the last point. I think you know, one thing that we haven't discussed so much here is that the idea of you know, we talked a lot in the last half an hour about how data helps the streaming service providers, but it should also help the end users and ultimately find the content they like.
Okay.
And I think that in some way, at least talking now as a consumer, not as a professional in this industry, there is always a feeling that most people, most services have not completely cracked this notion of recommendations, content recommendations. And I think part of it is to do with the right balance between machine and human. Like it can't be just human, it can't be just machine. Uh, and the second thing is really the ability to make those, speaking of usability of data and some of the topics that we discussed, to create something that's a lot more real time in terms of experimenting, seeing the response, adjusting. And at least in my view, going into the future, we call this cognitive TV, right? The idea is that there will be a lot less content. I mean, in my perfect world, the concept of the rail that everybody are used to, because folks like Netflix have taught us to get used to that, and maybe others, is irrelevant anymore. There's just going to be one content that either something you are continuing to watch, or if you're browsing, there's one particular piece of content that right here, right now, you're most likely to want to watch, and it's just there for you. Do you think we can get to something like that?
Yeah, I mean, fully agree with the concept. I think there is, again, there are some steps to reach that level, but definitely one of the concepts that are more hot in terms of personalization right now is contextual personalization, right? So now most of the AI personalization engines are built on top of, you know, how similar you are to other individuals and how similar each piece of content is between them, right? So mixing both, then you receive a recommendation. But the reality is that now we are going to have much more in the future, near future, much more channels to get inputs of data that can improve that. Imagine, for example, that once the voice controls and voice interactions will be much more massive, it's going to be tons of data that you're going to receive about how people sound and, you know, emotions and words they use and how they ask for specific content. All these things can be put in the, you know, in the cocktail of the station and are going to improve that level. So and other things like how are you watching content if you are alone, if you are at your home, I mean, geolocalization. There's many other things that are not yet there that are going to happen. And I think that it's going to be a big shift in that real-time personalization that you mentioned, that now looks like very algorithm based, right, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. So just before we get into the last part of this, maybe we talked about some of the good things. Let's talk about the bad and the ugly. What like are the biggest mistakes you see customers are doing when it comes to their data strategy? Like what you would say, don't do.
Yeah, well, first of all, I would say that if you want to face a big data or data project, you know, media and entertainment, first thing is get upper management support, right? So there's a lot of companies that okay, no, I want to do things around data, but they don't have really a strong management support. And that's some of the big mistakes and reasons for failure, right? So that would be my second, that would be my first advice. Second is you need to make sure that you rely on modern technologies. Everybody knows that, I mean, big data, it's been in a big shift in the last years, right? Because of these cloud capabilities that we all are now using. So you need to rely on modern data platforms. Otherwise, you're not going to be flexible, and you are not going to be able to create this ingestion, storage, processing, and unified visualization cycle. That is these are your pillars. If you don't have this in the right way, you're going to fail anyway. It doesn't matter how much investment you put on it. So that would be my main advice. I think is get the management support together with the strategy, as you mentioned, and second, rely on modern technologies. I think it's not valid to rely on 5 years ago technologies today if you want to meet this competitive landscape that video services are facing.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I would add one more thing maybe, which is think before you act, because here's a story. One of the customers we're working with, they had this big, and this was in the early days actually, before even like big cloud, big data technologies. They were working on this huge project to identify churners. And there are people with potential for churn. That's a pay TV operator. And they were working very hard to find those people, and they managed to pretty accurately identify who are those who are going to churn. And when you think about it, it's not always that difficult. The problem was that when they did the experiment, that they actually approached a lot of those people, they actually caused churn. Because they called the customers and said, hey, we're noticed you're not using the service so much. Let us offer you some kind of a discount. And the guy says, wait a second, I'm not using the service. Why am I paying for this? So they actually pushed some of the customers into a decision and made them aware that they're in this decision junction, and actually got the opposite result. So I think that you always have to actually be careful before you act on any of the insights, and it doesn't like replace the data and the insights do not replace your strategy and your thinking.
That's the human touch that we previously mentioned. Yes,
that's the theme of our discussion. Absolutely. Good. So yeah, I think that was a little bit of at least some of the questions. It's been fun so far, but I'm conscious of the time, and I wonder if we have any audience questions that we want to address that we got.
Yes, actually we do. We don't have, as you mentioned, we don't have much time. So I think this one is actually for you, Gidi. How can you use the data to take real-time actions? Because, well, there is time to process the data, but when it comes to real-time actions, what will be your recommendation?
I think it goes back to something we said earlier, which is you don't always have to take real-time actions. It really depends on what is the persona, what is the role, what is the type of data you're dealing with. In the case of quality of experience, if you suddenly have playback failures that go through the roof, obviously you have to take real-time actions. So that is the sort of data where you need really to take real-time actions. I think that when it comes to a lot of the marketing data or user experience analysis, actually not taking real-time actions, speaking of our last example here on churn, is might be a good idea. So you sort of get the batch of the data analyzed, you understand, you figure out. Creating the marketing campaigns, also takes planning and time. So I think that is around the marketing and data. When it comes to recommendations, obviously, as we discussed, the infrastructure and the ability to have real-time experiments and improvements based on content that you surface to the users, as well as insert your own, we call it the boost mechanism, right? So when you have your own needs as the service provider to boost some specific content. So to combine that with curation and with real-time recommendation and experimentation is an important thing in a complex ecosystem to measure, and that should be taken into consideration.
Thank you for that. We have another question on the monetization of the data from the audience. Do you see ways to monetize the data acquired by the platform through intelligence or analysis, basically by selling the insights or analysis to other platforms?
This for me or for GD?
Yeah.
For me? Okay. That's an interesting point. I think there is a lot of concern right now about data privacy, right? And all the aspects, especially in Europe, we've been in for the last couple of years, talking a lot and improving a lot our systems to meet the GDPR policies. And now the States is becoming more and more harder as well. So I think, of course, you need to meet those requirements because end users' data privacy is the most important. But saying this, and when you work at the right aggregation level of data, there is, of course, a lot of opportunities. I think not just for us as a platform, right, but also for customers, right? So they can really use data for creating specific products for end users. Like I like, for example, the way Spotify is doing this. Probably some of the audience know it, but at the end of the year, Spotify every year send you like a very, very detailed report per user about how much you have consumed music, the tracks that you mostly watch, how long you've been listening to specific genres. So maybe there is not a strong direct opportunity for monetization with end consumers, talking about D2C services, but there is a lot of opportunities for creating additional add value products around your core offering that are going to have a huge impact of engagement with the end user. So I think definitely there is a lot of room for using data in that sense.
I totally agree. If I can add a couple of quick points, monetization doesn't necessarily have to be, as I think Geronimo just said, doesn't necessarily have to be a direct sell of the data. I think that there are two aspects where you can actually see ROI on the data. It depends a little bit on your role. If you're a super aggregator, if you're a pay TV, a telco that has a new cloud TV offering, and you're aggregating content, having data to actually inform your content strategy and make the right content acquisition decisions is super important, and it can actually have a direct impact on your bottom line in terms of spending money on the right content. And at the same time, having data and not necessarily selling that data, but using it to, as they say, data is the new oil. So using it to oil the channels, the communication with content providers and advertisers by providing them greater insights if they use your platform could help you in that relationship as well, which may have a commercial impact. So these are two other examples we've seen in the market.
Thank you both for that. We actually running out of time. That was a great and fascinating discussion. Indeed, we can speak about data for a long time, and we can say a lot of things about it. And what is really shown is that actually data-driven operation is crucial for next generation cloud TV services success. I would like to thank all of you for joining us here today, and thanks to our experts, Geronimo and Gidi, for sharing your insights with us. This session will be available on demand shortly as well. And again, thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did, and have a wonderful evening to you all. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thanks.
you, and thanks, Geronimo. It's been fun. Let's have hummus sometime
Yeah.
soon.
Thanks, Edith. Let's do that.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.